My brother's girlfriend mocked me at family dinner, and everyone laughed along. Dad said, "Stop embarrassing us." So I stayed quiet until she bragged about her career. Then I pulled out my phone and destroyed everything they built on my back. I don't even know why I kept going to those family dinners. Every year, it was the same thing. My brother Derek was the golden boy, the one everyone praised. And Rachel, his girlfriend. She'd been joining us for years now, always managing to worm her way into the spotlight. The truth was, I was tired of being the one everyone overlooked. Tired of hearing how amazing Derek was and how lucky he was to have such a successful girlfriend. But most of all, I was tired of how everyone expected me to just sit there and take it. It was the usual set. Up tonight the old house smelled like roasted chicken. The flickering warmth of the dim lights made everything feel close, like the air was thick with family expectations. Derek was at the head of the table, as usual, looking smug with Rachel by his side, talking about how she'd just landed another big promotion. It was a success story that she never got tired of telling, especially when my dad was around to hear it. I could see her eyes gleaming, the way she loved the attention. Derek looked over at me once or twice. But it wasn't to check on me, he was probably just making sure I didn't ruin the moment. The family was chatting about whatever it was that made them all so happy. But I was barely paying attention. I was staring at my plate, trying to block out the laughter. It was all the same. Rachel talking about her career like she was a celebrity. Everyone hanging on to her every word. And there I was, doing my best not to let it show how much it stung. Then it came, as it always did. A jab hidden behind a laugh. "Scott, still at home with mom and dad." Rachel said it lightly, as though it was just a joke, but I knew better. It wasn't the first time she'd made that kind of comment. The table chuckled, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I swallowed, trying not to show how much it bothered me. My dad shot me a look, the kind he always gave me when I was being too sensitive. "Stop embarrassing us, Scott," he said, his voice cool, but carrying the weight of the decades of expectations. It was like he was telling me to just accept it, that I should be proud to be the quiet one, the obedient one, the one who did everything for the family but never asked for anything in return. I stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air. No one would back me up, and I didn't expect them to. I had learned long ago that speaking up would only make things worse. But inside, I was boiling. Inside, I was tired of always being the one who was made to feel small. Every single time I went along with it, it hurt a little more. But tonight was different. Rachel kept talking, her voice so sweet and full of confidence as she went on about how hard she worked to get her latest promotion. Derek nodded along, his hand resting casually on her shoulder, looking every bit the proud boyfriend. No one seemed to notice how Rachel's words had begun to dig into me. I was starting to see red, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it in. I felt like I was suffocating in that room, like I couldn't breathe with all the laughter and empty compliments surrounding me. The warmth from the dinner table felt stifling. I could hear the clink of silverware, the faint hum of the overhead lights, but all I could think about was Rachel's voice and how everyone else in the room seemed so content to let her keep belittling me, without even noticing. But I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Not this time. I found my hand reach for my phone under the table. It was time to turn the tables. The dinner had fallen into that familiar rhythm. Rachel was talking about some new project she was managing, Derek nodding along with that stupid proud smile of his. I hated that smile. It was the same one he wore every time he got praise from someone, like he had worked harder than anyone else. I knew it wasn't entirely his fault. He was the golden child, the one who always did what was expected of him. But tonight, with Rachel by his side, it felt different, like I was invisible in my own family. The room was warm, the air thick with the smell of garlic and roasted vegetables. The flickering light from the chandelier above made the walls look like they were closing in on me. I stared at my plate, the food barely even registering. The sounds of conversation around me felt like a dull hum, just background noise. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for Derek. I just wished for once I could get a little bit of attention. Not for the things Rachel and Derek had done, but for the things I had done. I thought about the years I'd spent quietly taking care of everything, making sure the house was kept in order, picking up the slack whenever someone needed help. Derek was off making his name in the world while I stayed behind. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. I had always chosen them over my own plans, my own dreams, and now it felt like Rachel was rubbing it all in, like I wasn't enough just as I was. I felt a surge of anger but kept it down, tamping it back like I always did. Let it go, I told myself. It's just one more dinner. Just one more. But the words kept pressing in. Still living at home with Mom and Dad. Rachel had asked. The way she said it, like it was a joke. It wasn't funny. Not to me. I wasn't some slacker who couldn't take care of himself. I had worked hard. I'd worked harder than anyone in this room ever knew. But no one ever saw it. I was the invisible one, the one who was always there but never noticed. Stop embarrassing us, Scott, my dad had said. His voice was calm, but the weight of it hit me hard. It always did. My dad, who had taught me the value of hard work and sacrifice, now just wanted me to shut up and take it. He didn't understand. He never did. I could feel my jaw tightening, my hands clenching around my fork. I wanted to say something, to stand up for myself, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready. And besides, every time I did speak up in the past, it only seemed to make things worse. So I stayed quiet, like I always did, and let Rachel's voice wash over me. But then, as if to seal my fate, she started talking again. She was going on about her promotion, how she had outperformed everyone at work, and how her boss was so impressed with her. It's been a long road, she said. But it's all finally paying off. I'm really proud of where I've gotten. She was smiling, of course. The smile that made her look like she was the most important person in the room. And everyone, my father, Derek, my mother, nodded along, hanging on every word, like she was the one who mattered, like I didn't. I felt something snap inside me. The anger I'd been holding back for so long finally boiled over. I couldn't take it anymore. The way they all praised her, the way they all let her walk all over me, I was tired of being the quiet one. Tired of being the invisible one. I'd been silent for too long. And tonight, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not anymore. I pushed my chair back slowly, making sure no one noticed what I was about to do. They were too busy listening to Rachel. Too busy agreeing with whatever she said. That was when I reached for my phone under the table. I'd never done anything like this before, but tonight I had had enough. I was done being the family's punching bag, done letting them treat me like I didn't matter. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, that it was going to change everything. But I also knew I couldn't let this moment slip by. I had to show them. I had to show them all just how much I'd been hurt. Rachel kept going on, her voice smooth and confident, as if she was the only one in the room with something worth saying. I've worked so hard to get here, she said, flashing that smile, the one that could charm a room full of people into believing she was the most successful person to ever walk into it. I can't even count how many late nights I spent at the office. But it's all been worth it. I'm finally getting the recognition I deserve. The words landed like punches. I could feel my chest tighten, my fists clenching under the table. But I kept my head down, staring at my plate. I was so damn tired of hearing about Rachel's career. Tired of hearing how hard she worked, how much better she was than me. I wasn't jealous, not exactly. I just wanted to be seen for once. I wanted my family to notice all the things I had done, all the sacrifices I had made. But no, it was always Rachel. Always Derek, the charming, successful younger brother who could do no wrong. It was exhausting, trying to live up to that image they had in their minds of what I should be. Quiet, humble, always willing to give up what little I had for the sake of the family. I had spent so many years doing just that. Watching Derek get praised for things he barely tried for while I was left in the background, cleaning up the messes no one else cared about. I was the one who stayed home when Dad was sick, who paid bills when Mom couldn't, who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. I didn't ask for any recognition. I never did. But sometimes, just sometimes, I wondered what it would feel like to be acknowledged. To be the one who was noticed for a change. But there I was, sitting at the dinner table, invisible once again. Rachel was basking in the glory of her own success, and Derek was right there with her, nodding along, supporting every word. The family was hanging on to her every sentence, as if she was the only one in the room worth listening to. I felt the familiar knot of resentment coil in my stomach, but I did my best to push it down. This wasn't the time. It wasn't the place. Then Rachel said it. The line that made my blood boil. You know, Derek and I are planning to move in together soon. I think it's time for me to take that next step, career-wise too. A lot of exciting opportunities ahead." She smiled, that perfect, smug smile of hers, the one that said she had it all figured out. The one that made me feel like I was stuck in a hole I couldn't climb out of. Derek chuckled. "Yeah, we've been talking about it. It's gonna be great. Everything's just falling into place." And that was it. That was the moment when I finally snapped. The moment when the weight of everything I had kept inside came crashing down. All the years of being the quiet one, of watching as my family fawned over Derek and Rachel, of biting my tongue every time Rachel made another snide remark or Dad told me to stop embarrassing him. I had done everything they asked. I had lived my life in the background, doing what they wanted, supporting them in ways they would never understand. But not anymore. I stood up from the table slowly, pushing the chair back with a quiet scrape that echoed in the silence of the room. Everyone turned to look at me, but no one said a word. They were too caught up in Rachel's latest triumph to notice the change in my expression, the way my eyes had hardened. I wasn't going to play the obedient son anymore. Without saying anything, I reached for my phone. I could feel their eyes on me as I pulled it out, but I didn't care. This was my moment. My voice. I unlocked the screen, scrolling quickly through my photos until I found what I was looking for. My hands were steady, even as my heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't stop now. I had to do this. Rachel was still talking, oblivious to what was happening, still trying to sell her story about how perfect her life was. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was done listening. I pressed play on the video. The sound of her voice filled the room, but it wasn't the voice of the confident, successful career woman who had everyone's attention. It was the voice of someone who had let her mask slip for just a second, someone who had no idea that I had been paying attention all along. The video was a recording from a few months ago when Rachel had come to visit me at my apartment after a particularly rough family dinner. She had no idea I had been recording her when she made the comment, the one about how she had manipulated her way into Derek's life, and how she had used him to further her own career. I told him what he wanted to hear, she had said, laughing. He was so easy to reel in, and now I've got everything I need. My career's taken off, and Derek's just, well, Derek's Derek. The words were out there now, and I couldn't take them back. But I didn't care. I watched the looks on everyone's faces as they realized what I had just played for them. Rachel's face went pale as the video continued to play, her confident mask shattered. Derek's smile faltered, and even my father's stern expression softened, like he was finally seeing something for the first time. I didn't feel the rush of satisfaction I expected. Instead, I felt something else, something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in my life, I had spoken up. I had stood up for myself, for everything I had done for this family, and I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. The party was in full swing. The living room was crowded, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of chatter. Music played softly in the background, the sound of a jazz band mixing with the voices of friends. A warm light bathed the room, but even in the glow, an undercurrent of tension was palpable. I stood near the corner, observing the scene unfolding in front of me. My husband was holding court, as usual, his hand raised dramatically as he spoke. He was the center of attention, surrounded by a group of our friends, all laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. He had that confident, self-satisfied look on his face, the one he wore when he was in control, when he had everyone exactly where he wanted them. I could feel the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. The way he gestured toward me, his smirk only slightly hidden behind the glass of wine he held so casually in his hand. He was talking about me again, of course. Something about my latest cooking attempt, or how I had managed to turn an ordinary dinner into something spectacular. At least, that's what he had told the group. He was always so eager to tell them what he believed was a funny story, a moment of mockery dressed up as praise. His eyes met mine from across the room, and I forced a smile. It was tight, strained, but I knew he expected it. I didn't want to cause a scene, especially not here, not in front of our friends. So I stood there, next to him, trying to make myself as small as possible. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to his words, feeling the weight of his gaze, knowing that they were all looking at me now. They were laughing, but I wasn't sure if it was because of him or because they were uncomfortable. Either way, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was on display, a punchline in a joke I didn't understand. The room felt suddenly too small, too suffocating. The laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it seemed far away as I forced myself to focus on the polite smile plastered to my face. I looked around, noticing how the others seemed to shrink back, shifting their weight uncomfortably, unsure of where to look. Even our friends weren't sure how to react. I couldn't blame them. He had a way of making them feel just as awkward as he made me feel. I wanted to disappear, to fade into the shadows where I wouldn't have to feel his presence looming over me, his subtle dominance in the room. But I couldn't move. I stood there, beside him, my hands clasped tightly in front of me, trying to hide the trembling. His voice continued, smooth and confident, a stark contrast of chaos of emotions inside me. His eyes flicked to me again, and I knew he was waiting for me to laugh, to play along. And I did. Of course I did, because that's what I always did, the same fake laugh, the same rehearsed smile. The same role I had played for years. I couldn't breathe. The noise of the party around me had become distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. I forced myself to focus on the conversation, but it was hard. My husband's voice was so loud, so confident, it echoed in my ears. He was the center of attention, always the center of attention, and I was left standing in his shadow. I felt the weight of the glass in my hand, the coldness of the drink a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. His arm draped over my shoulders, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like a display, like a trophy on his arm. His words floated in the air, his friends laughing, but I wasn't part of the laughter. I wasn't part of the moment. I wasn't part of him. "Isn't she amazing?" he said to the group, his eyes flicking to me with that same smirk. His tone was light, but I knew what he meant. He always said it like that, like he had done something heroic by marrying me, like I should be grateful for the privilege of being in his life. He was proud of his ownership, and it stung. The way his friends laughed along with him, the way they looked at me, as if I were an exhibit in a gallery, only to be admired from a distance. I couldn't stand it anymore. I looked at the glass in my hand, staring at the way my fingers gripped it too tightly, as if it could offer me an escape. I could feel the sweat beading on my forehead, the uncomfortable heat flooding my body, as I tried to mask the tension. I wasn't the confident woman I had been when I first walked into this room. I was something else now, something fragile, something broken. The worst part wasn't the way he spoke about me. It wasn't even the laughter that followed. It was the way I had come to accept it. It was the way I had been conditioned to play my part, to smile, to nod, to pretend everything was fine when I was slowly suffocating inside. How had I let myself become this? How had I let him turn me into someone I didn't recognize? "Tell them about the dinner last week," he urged, laughing. "She thinks she can't cook, but she made the most amazing meal. I'll give her credit for that, even if she still can't do a proper steak." His friends laughed again, but I didn't. I could feel my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. I forced a smile, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes, that couldn't possibly convey how trapped I felt, how small I had become. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I took a slow sip from my glass, hoping it would calm the rising tide of emotions. It didn't. Instead, it only made the suffocating feeling worse. The air around me seemed too thick, too heavy, as if every breath I took was an effort. I looked at him then. Really looked at him, his face full of arrogance, the smug expression as he basked in the attention. He didn't care that I was uncomfortable. He didn't care that I was dying inside. As long as he looked good, as long as everyone admired him, that was all that mattered. And in that moment, I realized something. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether I would continue to let him break me, or if I would break free. The room felt like it was spinning. I wasn't sure if it was the wine or the overwhelming sense of dread that clouded my mind, but I could hardly breathe. My husband was still talking, still holding court as if I were a side note in his life, a decoration to his story. The laughter continued, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I was lost in the rising tide of my own thoughts, each one crashing harder than the last. I could feel my hands trembling slightly, the glass still in my grasp. My chest tightened, but I didn't know what to do with the rush of emotions, anger, humiliation, frustration, all swirling together. I had spent years pretending it didn't bother me, but tonight, something shifted. Maybe it was the way he kept smiling at me, the way he thought he owned me, that made the suffocating feeling worse. Or maybe it was the way I had let it happen for so long. I excused myself, not waiting for anyone's reaction. I didn't care if they noticed. I didn't care if he noticed. I walked away from the group, my feet carrying me out of the living room and into the kitchen. The cold air from the open window hit me as I stood by the sink, trying to steady my breath. The house felt too small, too suffocating. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what I was going to do next. The sound of voices faded as I leaned against the counter, my mind spinning. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I had become someone I didn't want to be, someone who let herself be diminished, who had forgotten her worth. Somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that I was nothing more than a background character in my own life. But now, with the silence of the kitchen surrounding me, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. The realization hit me like a slap. I had to stop pretending. I had to stop accepting this version of myself. The one that had let him have all the power. The one that had hidden in the shadows of his life. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just angry at him. I was angry at myself. I was angry that I had let this happen, that I had let myself become so small. I could hear his voice in the distance, still commanding the room. I imagined him laughing, imagining how he must have looked at that moment, so proud of himself for being the life of the party, for making me the butt of his jokes. But I couldn't stay in that moment anymore. I couldn't stay in his world. The decision came suddenly, like the calm after a storm. I wasn't going to let him do this to me anymore. I wasn't going to play this game. I wasn't going to be his trophy or his joke. I was going to take back what was mine, my voice, my power, my dignity. I walked back into the living room, my breath steady now, my mind clear. He was still surrounded by his friends, still the center of attention. But this time, when his eyes met mine, I didn't shrink away. I didn't smile out of obligation. I didn't pretend. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady, clear. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. He looked at me, his expression shifting, confusion crossing his face. The room fell silent for a brief moment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. The silence that followed my words felt like an eternity. His expression faltered, confusion creeping into his eyes as he looked at me. The room, which had been alive with laughter and chatter just moments before, now seemed to hold its breath, the energy draining away. It was as if everyone was waiting for him to respond, for him to do something. Anything that would make this moment go away, that would make everything return to the way it had been. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let him diminish me any longer. I stood there, feeling the weight of his gaze on me, the tension thick in the air. I could hear the faint sound of the music playing in the background, but it felt distant, irrelevant. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart and the sound of my own voice, steady and unwavering as I spoke again. "I'm leaving," I repeated, more firmly this time, "and I'm not coming back." His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. He was caught off guard, his usual confidence shaken. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered everything, the way he had made me feel small, the way he had belittled me in front of his friends, the way I had allowed it all to happen. I didn't owe him anything, not anymore. His face twisted in frustration. "You're being dramatic," he said, trying to regain control. His tone was dismissive, like he was talking to a child, as if I were making a scene for no reason. "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice steady though the anger simmered beneath the surface. "I'm finally done pretending that I'm okay with this. Done pretending that this," I gestured between us, the years of silence and neglect and hurt hanging heavy in the air, "is okay." He stepped closer to me, his hand reaching out as if he could somehow fix this with a touch, with a gesture. But I wasn't having it. I took a step back, putting space between us, my heart racing as I stared him down. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice low but forceful. The words were a boundary I had never set before, but now they felt natural, necessary. He froze, his hands still outstretched, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to find the right words. But there were no words left. Nothing he could say would undo the years of guilt, up resentment. Nothing could make me forget the way he had treated me. The way he had made me feel invisible in my own life. "You think I can't do this?" I asked, my voice rising a little, the anger finally breaking through. "You think I need you?" "I don't need you. I never did." His face twisted in disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend what I was saying. He looked around the room, as if hoping someone would step in, as if someone would remind me of my place. But there was no one. There was just me. And I was finally standing up for myself. "I've put up with your shit for too long," I said, the words sharp now. "I've let you treat me like I'm nothing, like I'm your property. But I'm not. I'm done." I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest as I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see his reaction. The moment I stepped outside into the cool night air, it was like I could breathe again for the first time in years. The weight that had been on my shoulders, the constant suffocation of his presence, lifted with every step I took away from the house. I wasn't going back. Not to him. Not to that life. Not to any of it. I was free. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I was finally in control of my own story. The street outside was quiet, almost eerily so. The only sound was the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the distant hum of a car driving by. It felt surreal to be standing there, the weight of the decision settling on me. I had left. I had really left. I glanced back at the house, the lights still glowing in the windows. But I knew there was no going back now. I had crossed a line and there was no way to undo it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I would go, what I would do next. But at that moment, the unknown didn't feel as scary as the suffocating certainty of my life before. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The air felt fresh, almost cleansing, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I could finally think clearly, without his voice ringing in my ears, without the constant pressure of trying to live up to his expectations. My mind raced with possibilities, with 1,000 different ideas of what could come next. But I wasn't ready to think about the future just yet. I needed time, space to figure out who I was outside of his shadow, outside of that life I had been living for so long. For the first time, I allowed myself to be selfish. I needed to find myself again. I didn't have a place to go, so I ended up walking, not caring where my feet took me. The streets were quiet, the houses dark, and I felt like an intruder in a world that was no longer mine. It felt strange to be free, like I was standing at the edge of something, unsure of where to step next. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go back to the life I had been living. The one where I had lost myself. As I walked, memories of the past kept flooding my mind. The way he would smile at me, with that smug expression. The way he would belittle me in front of others. The way I had allowed it to happen. I had been so afraid to speak up, so afraid of what might happen if I stood up for myself. But now, with every step I took, I felt stronger, more sure of myself, more certain that I had made the right decision. I found myself at a small park, the swings gently swaying in the breeze. I sat on one of the benches, staring out at the empty playground, the stillness calming my racing thoughts. The cool night air wrapped around me, and for the first time in ages, I felt like I could think clearly. I wasn't just reacting to him anymore. I wasn't just trying to survive in a world he controlled. I was finally taking control of my own life. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know how I would rebuild, what my future looked like. But in that moment, sitting alone in the quiet park, I realized something important. I was enough. I was worth more than the way he had treated me. And no matter how hard it might be, no matter how much fear I might feel, I would never let anyone make me feel small again. The weight of the past few years was still heavy on my shoulders, but the future felt wide open, full of possibilities. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone to define me. I had my own voice now, my own strength, and that was more than enough to start over. And as the night stretched on, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because the truth was, the future was mine to create.